Hello and welcome back. In this video we're going to finish the office chair. Starting out here, I'm gluing together the mortise and tenon for the arms of the chair that we cut in the previous video, and then just clamping them tightly. And I'll make sure that they're at a 90-degree angle with a square. I'll repeat that on the other one. Now I have to cut the slats for the back and the bottom of the chair. Here I'm just using a stop block set up here. You can see where it cuts that cheek exactly. I cut it on all four sides, and then I'll move that blade over a little bit every time and make another cut just to get a perfect tenon. And that gets repeated on both sides for every slat. I believe there's 10 of them. Here's another technique you can do. You can slide into the blade. You start very low and then move it in and slide back and forth to get that same result. And here's the stack of all 10 completed slats. A lot of work in those. Now I'm doing some layout for the slats on the back of the chair here. Here I'm just laying them out by eye at first, and then I check with a tape measure to make sure they're even. And then I mark those first two tenons where I want them. And then taking a measurement off of those, I'm able to transfer that up the back of the piece. Just by keeping that same measurement every time, and that'll mark the rest of them in relation to that, so it's all even. And I just put them back on just for a sanity check to make sure that they're all in the spot that I want them to be, so it's even. And then I'll check that measurement with a tape just to make sure we're close, and we are. So that's on the front side of it, and I have to transfer those marks to the inside, which I'm doing here with a square. And I just transfer all those mortise lines that I made onto the side where the mortises will be cut. Now marking the bottom of it, the first stop of it, with a square here. And then I come back through and mark that top side. And that rectangular cut is the mortise that I have to make in this piece. And I'll just mark my waist with an X. Now I start with a Forstner bit here with a drill, just to drill out as much of the material as I can prior to chiseling. I started by doing one on each edge to establish that edge, and then went through in the middle and double checking with a cheap caliper there to make sure I'm at my depth, to make sure that the tenon doesn't bottom out. Now coming in with some chisels here, I just chisel these mortises by hand, taking out the rest of that waste. And then coming in with a smaller chisel and prying out the cut pieces. As there is a cheek to this, meaning that there's a part around the tenon that wraps in. This hole doesn't have to be exact, but the closer you can get to a tight fit, the better the joint will be. You see the red oak in the middle? That won't be seen, and it was scrap wood that I had that I wanted to use. So that's why I'll use it in those areas that won't be seen, as they'll be covered by the cushion. Now I'm going to repeat that process on the seat portion of the chair by following roughly the same steps, marking out here the approximate spot of the slats, and then removing those two, taking those measurements and transferring them down, just as with the back portion. I'll cut out the mortises for the seat with a little bit of movie magic here, which I should have done in the first place to save some time. Thank you. And now I'm doing a test fit up here just to make sure everything fits together, and it does. And now putting the back and the bottom together, everything fits there as well. Now I'm prepping to glue these bottom to the back, which I'm doing with epoxy here. I'm doing it with the slats in place but not glued, just to make sure everything will fit later. So all that's being glued here are those two joints that you see me working on, and all the slats are still not glued so it can come apart. And there's the finished joint there. I have some epoxy to sand off, but that's okay. That gets a nice tight joint, which is where a lot of the stress will be in this chair. And now I'm going to pre-finish everything ahead of time, which I do with polyacrylic. I end up doing 2 or 3 coats, but I'm showing one just for the purpose of this video. And I sand lightly in between each coat with 320 grit sandpaper. I'm just coating all surfaces here, just so that when I do that final glue up, if there is any squeeze out, it's easy to address. Here you can see I'm using a clamp to hold the piece upright so it doesn't tip over. This is a nice tip and it makes it easier to finish. Now gluing up the final piece here. So there's a lot of glue and a lot of surface area, and it was a little stressful doing. And ended up gluing both sides at once, which I wasn't planning on at first, but in the moment I called an audible and I glued both the top and bottom here. And there is some glue squeeze out, but I'm able to wipe it off easily since they were all pre-finished. And I just tap it all into place, just as I'd done previously, except now it's glued. And then adding plenty of clamps to keep everything tight while that glue sets up. Now out of the clamps, I'm working on attaching those arms to the base piece, which I'd have temporarily clamped in place. And I'm marking here where I want a screw to go through, which is how I'm fastening these two pieces together. I'm just marking the center of those joints, marking a line with a square, and then drilling them from the inside where they won't be seen. I'm just getting that portion here so I don't interfere with the slat on the inside. And repeating the same thing on the back, giving me just enough room where I could drill without interfering with that slat. And that'll give my screw a spot to sit with this Forstner bit with a little recess. And now I'm transferring this mark with a nail to the outside so that I can pre-drill there as well. And I size just slightly below the screw that I'm going to use. Now I'm ready to attach the piece, so I'm clamping everything in place exactly where I want it so nothing moves. And then screwing them into place with a heavy-duty exterior screw. And I'm just doing all these as a first test just to make sure I like it. And then I will come back through and add epoxy later. So the joint will be held with epoxy and screws. And there it is, from prototype to finished chair. Turned out pretty well. And of course I have to add my brand, as I always do. I really wanted to try this project because chairs were always intimidating for me to make. This is the first chair I've ever made, and it was not as hard as I thought. So I wanted to put this video out there to show that anybody can make a chair. If you put a little time in and do a little prototype like I did, it makes everything much easier. As always, thank you for watching. Make sure to comment below and like this video and let me know what you'd like to see next. Thank you.